Fala, meu jovem. Hoje é vídeo do Devin falando de retirar o refresh, a ward, a defesa PvE do 7, tá, mano?
Where we talk about all things New World. I'm here with Patrick and Dave today, and we're going to talk about wards and banes. We're getting rid of them.
Finalmente eles vão tirar.
See you next time. Just kidding. But we are removing wards and banes. You want to talk about that a little, Dave?
Yeah, I think, high level, we want people to be able to enjoy our gear system and really go for aspirational perks and perks that change their build. Whereas this felt a little bit too much like a chore, right? Like I had to get these to be competitive in certain modes like mutations, or I had to get resilient to be competitive in PvP. And I think we want to sort of like reduce the amount of required perks and instead let people sort of experiment and try around with perks.
But what stinks is I worked really hard to get all these corrupted wards. You just going to take them away from me?
Aí, colocaram em inglês. E agora?
Any gear you acquire in the future above gear score 625 will not have ward dropping, will not have resistance dropping, will not have resilient.
Pera. Alguém traduz? Pra mim? Game. Eu não sei se mas tudo indica que os perks de defesa a PvE vão virar uns perks que vão aumentar o máximo de vida. Certo? NA React. Mano, eu não sei o que tá escrito, mas tudo que indica é isso. É isso, então... Meu inglês não é bom, mas eu entendo de jogo, então isso tá certo.
Any gear you acquire in the future above gear score 625 will not have ward dropping, will not have resistance dropping, will not have resilient dropping. So the new gear you're gonna get is gonna be a lot more exciting because there's gonna be more viable perks on it. And less perks that you don't really want to see on your gear. So indestructible is unfortunately...
Galera, os perks, a partir do próximo patch, os itens que vinha mais de 625 não vai vir mais com defesa PvE, tá? Mas vai vir com outras vantagens, tá? E o perk indestrutível vai ser retirado do jogo também.
Gone. I know that was the community's favorite perk, so very sad.
Yeah, I don't know if unfortunately was the right word there, Patrick.
We're playing a sarcastic game right now for those not following along, but yes.
But I think that's an important thing, right? Like there's a couple of perks we just thought, hey, these are never going to be viable. Yeah. Like people will never want this in gear, and I think those are now disappearing. So that you don't get that disappointment of getting a cool piece of gear with it.
Sim, indestrutível é o melhor perk, mano.
It made sense when we were thinking about gear differently, a couple years ago, but the game's evolved. We listened to the players, we're pushing in different directions, and it becomes less a thing. So what else you want to talk about, Patrick?
So along with removing ward, resilient, and other perks, we're doing a broad perk rebalance. So
Opa! Além de remover a proteção, resiliente e outras vantagens, estamos amplificando reequilíbrio. Vão remover o resiliente, é isso? Além de remover proteção, resiliente e outras vantagens, vão... GG. GG. Acabou. GG.
Along with removing ward, resilient, and other perks, we're doing a broad perk rebalance. So there's a number of perks you're not going to see on that gear that is below gear score or above gear score 625 in the future. So we already talked about the wards and the resilience. Other perks will be going away. Some of the underperforming perks that we like but aren't really often selected by the community are going to be rebalanced to be more attractive choices. So I'm very excited about that. Then we're also going to be adjusting some of the currently overperforming perks, so things like attunement might see their...
Eles vão buffar as outras perks e trazer perks novos, gente.
Finding that nice equilibrium where any perk is valuable in the game.
One other thing that I think is worth mentioning, as we remove certain perks from the game, we're also going to be adding some new perks to make more room, especially on armor, right, where we remove all the wards, Patrick?
Yeah, that's correct. So we're adding a few new perks with this perk rebalance. So for example, touching on weapons specifically, there's only really been one good healing perk, and that's Blessed. We're adding a lot more healing perks.
Galera, eles vão adicionar, hoje em dia, que nem no cajado de cura, só tem um abençoado a mais. Eles vão trazer mais vantagens adicionais pra cura, tá? Mais perk pra ter mais diferente cajados de curas. Ou item que precisa do perk de cura, no caso.
So they add bonus healing.
Vai ter mais opção pra healer.
So you might want to run a certain staff for a boss that might be very damage over time heavy. Things like that. So we're trying to make sure that there's different gear for different situations and it's all exciting and valuable to players.
Estamos tentando garantir que haja equipamento diferente para várias situações diferentes. E tão emocionante, valioso para os jogadores. Topzera, vários set PVP, mano.
And as part of the compensation for this, we're talking about modifying how ward potions work, right?
Yeah. So one of the things, we do like this idea of a little bit of a prep loop for expeditions or various, sort of higher level content. So making the ward potions, which are currently sort of like, used for specific battles, making them last the whole expedition, right? So like you go in prep with a potion, so it's much lighter weight, but it still gives you a little bit of that prep and bolsters the economy.
Which I kind of like that because it makes it gives us the ability to put more enemy types in an expedition. And it not feeling like, oh my god, I have to change my gear, as opposed to just taking a new potion.
Agora vai tomar uma poção.
A couple things more
é estranho
on
poção, porque vazou food,
really
então.
Into this stuff. Yeah, I think on the attribute stuff, one of the things we do right now is that the attributes are asymmetric, right? So, there's ones where strength is more than dex, and then dex is more than strength. We're going to change that so that they're now equal, right? So that it's an equal split. And I think that will, be easier for players to understand, reduce some of the drop types and things like that.
Peraí.
Change that trick, right? So.
Oi? Mais uma coisa sobre o lado nerd. As pessoas realmente gostam disso, mas acho que sobre os atributos, uma das coisas que agora os atributos são assimétricos, certo?
I think on the attribute stuff, one of the things we do right now is that the attributes are asymmetric, right? So, there's ones where strength is more.
Então há aqueles em que força é maior que dex. E dex é maior que força.
More than dex.
Eles estão querendo. Mas pra arma, tipo, o Bacamar destaca com int e força. Quer dizer que os dois vai destacar igual? Nossa. Isso daí vai mudar totalmente o PVP, gente. Totalmente. Se for isso, é totalmente.
And then dex is more than strength. We're going to change that so that they're now equal, right? So that it's an equal split. And I think that will...
Tá. Eles estão falando do atributo do item, gente. O atributo, tipo, hoje em dia no item vem 15 de força e 10 de dex. Vai ser igual, tá?
Be easier for players to understand, reduce some of the drop types and things like that. So I think that'll be pretty interesting.
Patrick, is any of this going to have an effect on your inventory?
It will. So there's a lot of perk mods right now for crafting certain attribute bonuses that will be going away. The aim.
Não entendeu? É assim, mano. Acabou o Give a 10, mas, tipo, não vai ser mais Give a 10, gente, porque vai aumentar o GS e vai aumentar os pontos. Eles vão trazer também mais ponto acima do... mais atributo acima do 300. Tipo, vai ter 350 no atributo. Aqui, ó, que nem Constituição. 15 de com e 15 e 10 de int. Vai ser igual, tipo, 12, 12. Tá ligado? 13, 13. 14, 14.
There's to streamline crafting and also make you manage far fewer perk mods.
Jonah, palhaçada, meu bis give a 10. Ô burro! Seu bis give a 10 não vai ser mais bis, porque eles vão tirar Resiliente.
If you look in my inventory right now.
Sendo educado. Desculpa.
Now, I've probably got a couple hundred perk mods just sitting there. The goal there is to reduce that number significantly so you're crafting things that are more meaningful.
I'm with you on that. There's so many, it's hard to even get through them all when you're looking for some.
Yeah.
So overall, I think this is going to be a pretty massive change to the game and have a big impact. I'm pretty excited about it. But is there anything else either of you want to add?
No, I think this is going to be a really nice change, and I think Katie mentioned in our Q&A, like what's nice about this is it was really spurred by a lot of customer sentiment, right? Like I think players have been talking about how annoying Banes can be, especially when we had a couple expeditions that had multiple family types. That's what really brought it to the forefront.
Cara, isso vai ficar muito da
while
hora,
we were
velho.
looking at that, we made some changes in Imperium Forge.
Eu vou falar como que eu acho que vai funcionar o Resiliente, tá, gente?
At the same time, while we were doing that, we're like, what is really the value of this? And like, are players enjoying it? And it made us take a hard look at it.
There is just one more thing I thought of in the middle of this conversation that we can mention is it's also going to allow us to balance the expeditions and the mutations more toward a common thing and not assume people have these wards or don't have them. So I think that's going to create different builds coming in that are going to make the gameplay more interesting and more varied.
And hopefully a little less of, hey, link gear before I let you in my group. I think that's another big goal here.
Yeah, I think
Verdade, o pessoal não vai precisar mais linkar gear,
much
mano.
more strong for expeditions, then it's going to be your gear score speaks volumes, and then it's your play style is going to be the differentiator.
That's exactly right? Like in a theoretical world, like we're never going to hit this perfect the first time, but where every perk is just as viable as every other, it doesn't matter exactly which perks you have, just that you have, the gear score.
Yeah, and if you like to play a certain way, you're going to have perks that support that versus someone else. I think that'll be that's the dream space.
Vai ser da hora, mano.
We're going to need everyone who's watching. We're going to need their help getting there. It's pretty exciting. All right, well, I think that's all we got for today. Thanks, Patrick and Dave, and thanks everyone for watching. But before we go, we do have a question for the community. Actually, I'm going to ask two questions. If you could buff any perk, what would you buff? And if you could cut any perk, what would you cut? And with that, for the community, actually, I'm going to ask two questions. If you could buff any perk, what would you buff? And if you could cut any perk, what would you cut? And with that, if you like what you saw, let us know, like and subscribe.
Galera, como que eu acho que vai funcionar o Resiliente? Assim, mano. Ó, informação da bunda, tá, gente? Mas aí vai ser uma passiva do set leve, médio e pesada também, tá? Como o PV não crita, né? Então, vai ser um buff que vai funcionar como passiva do set leve, médio e coisa. Eu acho que, tipo, vamos supor, set leve vai dar 20% de resiliente, set médio 25% e set pesada 30%. Isso daí é um número de suposição, mas eu acho que vai ser passivo agora, o resiliente, tá, gente? Passivo pra PVP, pra ter mais oportunidade de perks rodar agora, tá? É isso, galera.